April, Karen Nichols is a member of our group, and she's attended many of our functions. She could not be here tonight, but she has a personal story with Gretchen about some of the things, and she wanted to share it. So how I'm going to introduce is I'm going to read Karen's letter to Gretchen tonight because she can't be here. So it says, "Dearest Gretchen, I wish I could be here tonight to introduce you, but you see, it's because of you that I'm not. I am so profoundly grateful to you for that. Tonight, I am with my son, preparing him to leave for college in a few days. Gretchen, there was a time when I never thought that he would have this opportunity because my Matt was bullied nearly to death at the age of 11. In 2011, there was no cohesive bullying law in Michigan. There was no cohesive definition of bullying, no blanket policies, no documentation policies, nothing. Each school district addressed this matter at their own discretion, and the Holt public school system failed. Karen lived in the Holt public school system at the time. I was told that my 11-year-old should just man up, that this is a rite of passage. He became suicidal. I had the tremendous honor and privilege to work with you to pass the Michigan anti-bullying law back in 2011. We spoke at the Capitol in Lansing, and we even made a video, starting with my daughter, that you showed through tears on the Senate floor. I watched you tearfully and fiercely fight on the behalf of children like mine who may not have survived 6th grade. Through your perseverance, the Michigan anti-bullying law became official in December of 2011, making Michigan the 48th state to have such legislation. Shortly after, I moved my son to Grand Haven to begin a new life with a clean slate, away from his tormentors and protected by this new law. He absolutely thrived and is fully recovered. I could never express the profound gratitude that I have for you, to be able to miss this meeting in order to see my son off to Grand Valley this fall and to cheer for him like a lunatic as he marches with his drums in the marching band. She says, "You are my hero. With sincere gratitude, I thank you and fully support your candidacy as Michigan's next governor. In this hostile political climate ridden with bullies, I know that you will stand up and fight for all of us, even a terrified little 11-year-old boy if necessary. Thank you, Gretchen. I hold you in my heart, Karen Nichols." So, without further ado, let's welcome Gretchen Whitmer.
You just heard that letter. I'm not going to hurt you. Well, thank you so much. That was quite an introduction. I've been introduced many times over the last 8 months and over the last, 16 years that I was in when I first ran for office, and that I think is the kindest introduction I've ever received. So thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me, and thank you for showing up again. I know I was supposed to be here, I think it was February, and I contracted bronchitis and an upper respiratory, and thought, I'm doing you a favor by not showing up, spreading my germs. So I've been looking forward to getting over here. I served for 14 years in the Michigan legislature, and at the close of that, I really thought, I am going to go back into the private sector. I'm 14 years and I was term limited, and the last 4 I was the Senate Democratic leader, and I got my teeth kicked in regularly. And I thought I'll go back to private practice, and I was teaching at the University of Michigan. I even taught at MSU, see I can even straddle that divide. I learned very quickly about myself that I have got no patience for leaders who try to minimize our expectations instead of fight for our aspirations. I'm looking at the Michigan that my daughters are growing up in. They're a freshman and sophomore in high school. And it hardly resembles the one that I think of when I tell people how proud I am to be from this state. I love the state of Michigan. And by God, I think we deserve better than what we're getting from our leaders. There was a point in time where our education system was the finest on the planet. And right now, our kids aren't getting the skills they need, and it's no fault of the teachers because they're not getting the support they need either. There was a time that people moved to Michigan for good paying jobs because you could make enough to actually afford to buy the car that you were making and raise your family up and retire with dignity in this state. And right now in Michigan, there are a lot of families that can't make ends meet. Many that are working 2 minimum wage paying jobs, and some that haven't seen a raise in 10 years. We deserve better. And there was a point in Michigan's history, not too long ago, that our infrastructure was sound and reliable, and your family was safe traveling the interstate. No worries of chunks of bridges falling through your windshield like we've even seen in southeast Michigan. And right now, we know that we have some roads that look like they're turning back to gravel. And finally, there was a point in our history where we lived up to our motto, the Great Lakes State. And right now, we have a city full of families that still cannot bathe their children, much less give them a glass of water at the dinner table. We deserve better than what we're doing. And in the interim, my prosecutor got caught up in a sex scandal. The judges in my county asked me to come in and clean up the prosecutor's office, and I did that for 6 months through the election, and then a successor was elected, and she took office January 1st, and I decided I'm not gonna wait any longer. I filed my paperwork to run for governor on January 3rd. I don't have patience. I mean, I think we've established that, right? But, so in the last 7 months, I have been traveling this state, and I have to tell you, I'm really encouraged by what I see. All right, before I got here today, I was in Wexford County, which I didn't even know Cadillac was in Wexford County. I've been there so many times, but I never thought about what county it was in. But now I know because I'm keeping track to make sure I get to every single county. But I'm so encouraged by what I'm seeing out there. People are showing up. I went to the UP in February. All right, let that sink in. I am committed. I went to the UP in February, and I went to 11 out of 15 counties. And everywhere we went, we had crowds showing up. I stood at a potluck at the Super 8 in Houghton, Michigan, and it was 250 people slammed into this little room to talk about where we are as a state and where we're going. And I feel so optimistic and energized by what I'm seeing across the state. And they're not all hardcore Democrats. They're not people who called themselves progressive, a year ago. They're not even people who voted in the last election. I'm always struggling, like, I want to shake them. Where were you at last night? But I'm glad you're here now. Because right now, the stakes are so high. The urgency of the problems that we're facing, combined with the magnitude of them, means we've got to get organized, and we've got to make sure that 2018 is a year where we start to set the agenda in Michigan. And so that's what this is all about. That's why I'm getting around the state. I'm not a stranger to tough fights. I don't go out of my way looking for a fight, but I don't back down from a tough one either. And I was talking with Ed, I think, back here about when we had the right to work. Yes, there you are, Ed. I knew you were there. That's where we talked about the right to work debate. And, right, the right to work for less. Or what we really should be calling it, corporate servitude. If we're going to be thoughtful in the words we're using. How during that time, when we had a governor who said, I'm not going to do anything, and lied through his teeth, and then did an about face at the, in the dark of night, in the cold of lame duck. I didn't just stand outside with the teachers and the firefighters and the police and the nurses who showed up. I opened up the doors to the Capitol, and we led the resistance from within my office. Because I know that our government doesn't work unless it works for us. It doesn't work if it's government that happens to us instead of comes from us. And by God, we're not going to abide leaders who are content to lock us out of the process, literally. That's what was happening. So I grew up in East Lansing and Grand Rapids. I'm a West Sider, even though I'm not this far west. I'm proud to be from the west side of the state. There are Democrats over here, I know that. father and a Frank Kelly Democratic mother. They didn't just vote that way. My dad was actually in the Milliken administration. He was the director of commerce. And my mom was one of Frank Kelly's top lawyers in the Attorney General's office. We had some interesting conversations at our house. But I tell you that because I was raised in a household where the lessons were these, that public service is important. To give back to your community is something that is really an important thing to do. It's also a privilege, and your allegiance to the people that you represent is supposed to be paramount to any party that you hail from. And it's your job to find solutions instead of watching people politicize our problems, to solve them and to get around a table with anyone who is interested in doing that. And that's why, as I look at my career in the legislature, and especially those last 4 years as the Democratic leader, where I was swamped in a sea of Republicans in state government, I'm really proud of the work that I did to fight back when they were going after women's access to our health care, to fight back when they were trying to take away, when they were passing corporate servitude, as we're going to start calling it, but then also to get to the table and roll up my sleeves. This governor did not show a lot of courage in my estimation in the last 7 years, but there was one thing that I think was really important, and I'm glad to say that I was a partner and I worked on with him, was he decided to go for expanding the Affordable Care Act and having Medicaid expansion here in Michigan. And he couldn't have done it on his own, because his Republican Party, he's never had a lot of success at leading them. They've led him more often than not. And so it relied on a partnership with the Democrats. And as the top Democrat in the legislature, I'm proud that I rolled up my sleeves and we got to the table and we put the votes together to get it done. And we've got 630,000 people, and this is another issue we talked about, who are now covered in Michigan that weren't before. And that is something I'm proud of. I'm eager to work with anyone who wants to get to the table and solve problems here in the state of Michigan. We need more leaders like that. We have a term-limited legislature that I think sometimes gets too into their own corners and get stuck vilifying one another, and to the point of the bullying environment that we are in right now. It's more important than ever that we are electing leaders who really are not content to just demonize people who disagree with them, but are eager to find some common ground where we can. Now, I started by telling you I'm not afraid of a tough fight, and that means we have to have a backbone and fight for the things that make us Democrats, fight for the things that we care about, that we know are going to move this state forward. But we also got to make sure that we're solving problems where we can. And so I'm grateful that I had the time that I did in the legislature to do some of those things. But we got a lot of work to do in Michigan. I think one of the big lessons of 2016 is this. We can't take any one or any vote or any community for granted. That's why I got in the race as early as I did, so I really can get into every county and every community that I can get to. That I'm building a platform that reflects what we want and need to see here in our state. One that really does make educating our kids a priority again, and supporting teachers so we get more educators to come into that profession, to stop treating our teachers so disrespectfully and give them the support they need to be successful. That we need to push forward an agenda that creates a path for every Michigander to get into a good paying job so they can make enough money to take care of their families and enjoy this state of ours. And that we demand accountability from our government so that the people in Lansing are looking out for us again, the people of this state. And I think that starts with rebuilding this party so we can rebuild this state. And that's why I jumped into this race as early as I did. I love it. I love people. I love traveling the state, and I'm learning everywhere that I go. It's only by engaging with the first-year teacher in Alpena Public Schools, who she has one child and qualifies for the bridge card. That's how little that the teacher in that district's being paid. That it puts a finer point on what this is all about and who this is all about for me and for this state. So I will stop the monologue now, and we can make this more of a dialogue, and you can tell me what you think I need to know, what you are interested in hearing from me, because I'd rather you direct where this conversation goes.
Okay, right up front, the youth vote.
In the 2016 Michigan primary, Senator Sanders won a surprise upset. That fall, Trump won with a slim margin. We don't need to rehash last year, but instead look forward. My question, Ms. Whitmer, how are you and your team looking to claim victory in this new political landscape? How do you expect to cut down allegations of being establishment and to truly build a diverse coalition of voters?
Thank you, Sam, for the question, and thank you for volunteering with my petitions back there. He's biased. I'm just gonna tell you right now. No, I appreciate the question, Sam. I think it's an important one. You know, as we think about what happened in the last election, I always think it's really important that we remember that Donald Trump won Michigan with fewer votes than George W. Bush lost Michigan to John Kerry. So it's not like all of a sudden Michigan went from being Barack Obama supporters to Donald Trump enthusiasts. It's that people didn't turn out and vote. That's who decided this election, were the people that did not turn out and vote. And I think that speaks to a couple of things. Number one, how important it is that we have a real grassroots ground game. That we turn out vote, we register voters, we identify voters, and we turn them out and get them to the polls. But it's also how important it is that we've given them something to vote for. You know, it seems like in this last presidential, as qualified as Clinton was and as many white papers as she had on every issue there was, that the end of the campaign was focused on why people shouldn't vote for Donald Trump as opposed to why people should vote for Clinton. And I think, frankly, we could make that observation about the last two governor's races too. And so I think it's really important that we have an aspirational message, that we talk about the Michigan that we deserve, the Michigan that our kids want to stay in, can afford to stay in, have opportunities to stay in. The Michigan where, you know, people are respected no matter what walk of life you are, and you've got rights and you can enjoy the water in Michigan that defines us. I think that these are things that we really have to get a lot better talking about, but putting forth an aspirational message. Now, on the question of establishment, I tell you, for 14 years in the legislature, I was the minority leader on everything, even within debates in my own party at times. I took on a Democratic governor when she wanted to start taking money out of the school aid fund to shore up the general fund, because I was afraid that that would be used as the blueprint for continuing theft from the school aid fund, and sure enough, it was. So I've never been afraid to take on the leaders, even within my own party, when I think they're wrong. But if by establishment, you know, the question means, and I know you don't mean this, but I know that this is a conversation that's happening out there, you don't have to choose between someone who's progressive and has experience. In fact, now more than ever, that is absolutely essential for making sure that the things we care about become a reality. I served with 3 different governors during my time in the legislature. There was one who was better able to get an agenda accomplished than the other 2, and it was John Engler. Now, please don't hear me to be saying that I liked his agenda, because I did not. I voted against it 99 out of 100 times. But I'll tell you this, understanding the legislature is absolutely essential to getting things done in Lansing. And Governor Snyder has been paralyzed by a supermajority of his own party because he doesn't understand how to get things done in Lansing. Governor Granholm worked her tail off and had all the right values, but never served as a legislator, and I think that really hampered her ability to get things done, and even to get votes on the Democratic side of the aisle on certain issues. So I think right now more than ever that experience and progressive is exactly the combination that we need to get this state back on track and to make it a reality. Because we're all progressive, but we gotta know